At 41 years old, Terrence believed he understood the architecture of his life. He was a certified public accountant, a man who lived by the reassuring certainty of numbers. His salary was a respectable $98,000 a year, a solid, tangible figure that provided a foundation for the world he had built with his wife, Alicia. That world was a modest, three-bedroom brick ranch in Atlanta's Collier Heights, a home filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the quiet hum of a life he thought was stable. But on the sun-drenched afternoon of his 41st birthday, that entire structure was scheduled for demolition. The party was his idea, a low-key affair. A few dozen friends from church and work, his neighbors, the smell of ribs smoking on his trusty $400 char-broil grill. He wore a simple $30 polo shirt and his favorite pair of jeans, feeling a deep, uncomplicated contentment. The backyard buzzed with the easy laughter of people who had known him for years. He was refilling a bowl with potato salad when a sudden silence fell over the yard, a quiet so abrupt it felt like a pressure drop. He turned. Standing at the edge of the patio were two women, his wife, Alicia, and her mother, Eleanor. They were not dressed for a barbecue. Alicia wore a stark white sheath dress that probably cost more than the grill, a $1,500 piece he'd see on a credit card statement later. Her beautiful deep brown skin, usually warm and inviting, looked taut and cold. Her hair, typically styled in elegant twists, was pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch the skin around her eyes. Beside her, Eleanor stood like a general surveying a battlefield, her arms crossed over a $2,000 Burberry trench coat she wore despite the Georgia heat. A collective, uneasy breath was held by 30 people holding paper plates. Terrence felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was not a surprise visit. They lived here. But this was an entrance, a declaration. Alicia walked toward him, her $600 heels aerating the lawn. She didn't look at his friends. She didn't look at the carefully arranged food on the picnic tables. Her eyes were fixed on him, and they were utterly devoid of the affection he had known for 12 years. She stopped in front of the main table where his birthday cake, a simple sheet cake from Publix that cost $28.99, sat waiting. From her $2,400 Yves Saint Laurent handbag, she pulled out a thick manila envelope. She didn't hand it to him. She dropped it. The envelope landed with a flat, definitive thud right next to the cake, splattering a bit of blue frosting onto the crisp paper. "What is this, Alicia?" Terrence asked, his voice barely a whisper. Her voice, in contrast, was clear and loud, designed for the audience she had curated. "It's over, Terrence. I'm done." She gestured at the envelope with a perfectly manicured finger. "Those are divorce papers. I've been more than patient." A wave of nausea washed over him. The sounds of the party, the music, the chatter, had vanished, replaced by a ringing in his ears. He could feel the eyes of every single guest on him, their pity and shock, a physical weight. "You're doing this here?" he managed to say, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "At my birthday party? When else was I supposed to do it?" she shot back, her voice sharp with practiced indignation. "You're never available. You're always working, always balancing the budget." "There's nothing left to balance, Terrence. We're done." She looked at the envelope. "The asset disclosures are all there. It's a fair split. Just sign it now, and we can get this over with. We're done waiting." And then, the moment that would burn itself into his memory with the permanence of a brand happened. Eleanor, his mother-in-law, began to clap. It wasn't loud, but it was slow, deliberate. Each clap a punctuation mark on his public humiliation. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. The sound echoed in the dead silence of the backyard. A few people shifted uncomfortably, looking away, their faces a mixture of horror and embarrassment for him. but no one said a word. They were frozen. Terence looked from his wife's cold face to her mother's triumphant one. He saw the truth of the last few years crystallize in that single terrible moment. This wasn't an argument. This was an execution, and they had sold tickets. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, so deep it was almost silent, a pressure building behind his ribs. He had no idea just how calculated this ambush was, or the critical, arrogant mistake they had made. But as he stood there, stripped bare in front of his friends, a tiny, cold part of his analytical mind, the CPA part, began to whir almost on its own. They thought this was the end. They had no idea it was the beginning. What do you think is the worst part of a public betrayal like this? The act itself, or the silence of those who watch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's get back to Terence's story. The facade of their life had been expertly constructed, mostly by Terence. From the outside, they were a successful black couple in Atlanta. He, the steady, reliable CPA. She, the stylish, vibrant partner who had a flair for interior design, though it was more of a hobby than a profession. Their life was a carefully curated collection of domestic scenes, each with a hidden price tag that only Terence truly understood. Their home, the $350,000 brick ranch in Collier Heights, was a source of constant, low-grade tension. For Terence, it was the culmination of a decade of diligent saving for the $70,000 down payment, money he had earned and invested long before he met Alicia. For Alicia, it was a starter home she had long outgrown. A typical Saturday morning scene would find Terence in the yard, mowing the lawn with his 10-year-old Craftsman mower he'd bought used for $150. He found a quiet satisfaction in the work, in the neat lines on the grass, in maintaining the thing he had worked so hard for. Alicia would emerge around noon, holding a mug of coffee, dressed in a $250 silk robe. "Are you almost done with that noise?" she'd ask, standing on the pristine porch he had recently repainted himself over a weekend, using $80 worth of bear paint from Home Depot. "Eleanor is coming over for lunch, and the whole house smells like gasoline." Her mother's visits were another layer of the facade, and another source of financial friction. Eleanor would sweep into their home, her eyes scanning every surface with a critical gaze. "Terence, darling," she'd say one afternoon, running a finger along the top of their perfectly functional 10-year-old Samsung television, a 55-inch model that had cost him $900 back in 2014. "Don't you think it's time for an upgrade? Alicia deserves a proper home theater. My friend just had a 75-inch screen installed. It only cost $3,000. It makes a statement." Terence would smile politely, a practiced, non-committal expression he had perfected over the years. "We're happy with this one, Eleanor. It works just fine." "Fine is the enemy of fabulous," Eleanor would sniff, settling onto their comfortable but modest $1,200 Ashley furniture sofa. She would then turn to Alicia. "I don't know how you put up with it, baby." The contrast in their financial philosophies was a constant, unspoken battle. Terence's watch was a simple, elegant $89 Timex, a gift from his late father. Alicia's was a $6,000 Cartier tank she had bought herself as a pick-me-up after a minor disagreement. He drove a 2018 Honda Accord, a sensible car with 80,000 miles on it, its $28,000 price tag long since paid off. She drove a leased BMW X3, which cost them $650 a month, a line item in his budget spreadsheet that always made him wince. One evening about a year before the disastrous birthday party, he sat at their $800 IKEA dining table, his laptop open. He was updating their finances, a ritual he performed every Friday night. He'd tracked every penny since they were married, a habit that Alicia found both irritating and baffling. "Why do you obsess over it?" she'd ask. "Money is meant to be enjoyed, not counted." That night he called her over. Alicia, we need to talk about this. He pointed to a line item on the screen. A charge for $3,200 from Neiman Marcus. What was this? She glanced at the screen, unconcerned. Oh, that. A few new things for the season. And a bag. It was on sale. A $3,200 sale? Terrence asked, keeping his voice level. Honey, my take-home pay is about $5,500 a month. The mortgage is $1,600. The car lease is $650. Utilities, food. This kind of spending isn't sustainable. Sustainable? Terrence, don't be so dramatic, she said, waving a dismissive hand. All my friends are redoing their kitchens, going to Europe. I buy one handbag, and you act like the world is ending. You're a CPA. You're supposed to be good with money. Make more of it. The words stung, but he didn't show it. He just closed the laptop. That's not how it works, Alicia. Being good with money means living within our means. My salary provides for this house, this life. It's a good salary, but it's not infinite. She sighed, a theatrical sound of deep suffering. My mother was right. I married for love, but I should have held out for a man with more ambition. She walked away, leaving him alone at the table, the glow of the screen reflecting in his glasses. The insult hung in the air, another small crack in the foundation of their marriage. He had no idea that she wasn't just spending his money. She was already planning how to take the rest of it. That conversation, he would later realize, was not about a handbag. It was a test of how far she could push him before he broke. And his calm, logical response was, in her eyes, a sign of weakness. The cruelty did not begin at the birthday party. It merely culminated there. For the last 2 years, Terrence had been living in a slow-boiling pot. The temperature cranked up so gradually, he almost didn't notice he was being cooked alive. The escalating betrayal was a series of scenes, each one chipping away at his sense of security and self-worth. It started with small, dismissive comments that grew into full-blown assaults on his character. About 18 months before the divorce papers, they were at a dinner party at the home of one of Alicia's friends. The house was a sprawling, modern construction in Buckhead, all glass and steel, easily worth over $2 million. The host, a surgeon, was showing off his new Porsche 911, a $150,000 monument to his success. Alicia's friend's husband clapped Terrence on the shoulder. So, Terrence, what do you drive? Before he could answer, Alicia laughed, a high, brittle sound. Oh, Terrence is in charge of our carbon footprint, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. He drives a very sensible, very beige sedan. The group chuckled, and Terrence felt a hot flush of shame. He just smiled and said, It gets me from A to B. Later in the car, the silence was thick. Why would you say that, Alicia? He asked quietly. What? It's true, she replied, staring out the window. I'm tired of being the only one at the party whose husband doesn't have anything to show for himself. My friends feel sorry for me. Your friends' husbands are surgeons and investment bankers. I'm a CPA. It's a different profession, he said, his hands tight on the wheel of his sensible sedan. It's a different level of ambition, she corrected him coldly. The callback to her previous insult was not lost on him. The financial pressure intensified. Eleanor's boutique clothing store, Eleanor's Elegance, was failing. It was a vanity project she'd funded with a second mortgage on her condo, a space filled with overpriced, out-of-style garments that gathered dust. One evening, about 8 months before the party, Alicia and Eleanor cornered him in the living room. It felt like a formal deposition. Terrence, we need your help, Alicia began, her tone unusually serious. My mother needs a small business loan to update her inventory and launch a website, she explained. Just a bridge loan. About $75,000. Terrence felt his stomach clench. He had seen the boutique's books. It wasn't a business. It was a black hole. Alicia, we can't do that. The business is losing thousands of dollars a month. No bank would approve that loan. That's why you need to co-sign, Eleanor chimed in, her voice sharp. With your credit score and your stable job, it would be a sure thing. Co-signing means we would be responsible for the debt when the business can't pay it. And it won't be able to pay it, Terrence explained patiently, as if to a client. It would put our house at risk. I can't do that. Alicia's face hardened. So you're saying no? You're refusing to help my mother? I'm refusing to make a catastrophic financial decision that will bankrupt us, he said, his voice firm. Eleanor stood up, her face a mask of fury. I knew it, she spat. I told you, Alicia, he's not a provider. He's a gatekeeper. He hoards his little salary and keeps you from living the life you deserve. He is a small man with a small mind. She turned and stormed out of the house. Alicia didn't follow her. She turned to Terrence, her eyes blazing. You just humiliated my mother, and you humiliated me. You would rather count your pennies than support my family. I will never, ever forget this. She walked out of the room, and for the next week, she treated him with a frigid disdain that was worse than any argument. The house grew cold. The final, most vicious episode before the party happened about 2 months prior. Terrence came home from work early one Tuesday around 4 p.m., hoping to surprise Alicia and perhaps break the suffocating tension between them. He walked in the front door and heard voices coming from the kitchen. It was Alicia and Eleanor. He paused in the hallway, about to call out, when he heard his own name. I just don't know how much longer I can do this, Mama, Alicia was saying, her voice thick with a frustration that sounded utterly genuine. He's so boring, so predictable. Every night it's the same thing. He comes home, asks about my day, eats the dinner I made, and then opens that stupid laptop to review the numbers. It's like being married to a calculator. Eleanor made a sympathetic noise. I know, baby. But the plan is in motion. The lawyer said we have a strong case for spousal support, especially if we frame it as emotional neglect. We just need to document everything. His refusal to help with the boutique is a huge point in our favor. It shows a pattern of financial control. Terrence stood frozen in the hall, his heart pounding against his ribs. A plan. A lawyer. They were building a case against him, in his own house. And the asset sheet is ready, Alicia continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We're listing his premarital savings as a joint asset from an investment club we both contributed to, and my credit card bills, we're just going to leave most of those off the initial disclosure. By the time his slow, methodical brain figures it all out, it will be too late. The judge will have already made a preliminary ruling. Good, Eleanor said with satisfaction. And the party is the perfect time to serve him, in public. Maximum impact. No one would question a woman pushed to her absolute limit. They'll see you as a victim. A cold dread, pure and absolute, washed over Terrence. It was all a lie. The arguments, the insults, they weren't spontaneous expressions of frustration. They were calculated steps in a long-term strategy. He was not a husband, he was a mark. He backed away silently, his briefcase feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. He walked out the front door, got back into his beige sedan, and drove to a park a few miles away. He sat on a bench, watching the sun set, the sky turning a bruised purple and orange. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel sadness. He felt nothing. A profound, terrifying emptiness. The man Alicia was describing, the boring, controlling calculator, was a stranger to him. But he knew with chilling certainty that he was about to meet the man he would have to become to survive this. Someone just as cold, just as methodical, and far more precise. The party ended not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing fizzle. After Alicia and Eleanor made their dramatic exit, a thick, unbearable awkwardness descended upon the backyard. Friends who had been laughing with him an hour earlier now struggled to meet his eye. One by one they came up to him, murmuring apologies and condolences as if he had suffered a death in the family. "I'm so sorry, Terrence. Call me if you need anything. This is just awful." Within 30 minutes, the yard was empty. All that remained was the wreckage, half-eaten plates of food, crumpled napkins, and the birthday cake, now mockingly cheerful, with its one slice missing where the envelope had landed, and the envelope itself sitting on the picnic table like an unexploded bomb. For a long time, Terrence just stood there, listening to the evening sounds of his neighborhood, a distant dog barking, the faint laughter from another house. Rain began to fall, a soft, misty drizzle that felt like a confirmation of his misery. The drops pattered on the table, darkening the manila envelope. At 6:47 p.m., he finally moved. He walked over, picked up the envelope, and carried it inside. He left the mess in the yard. He couldn't bear to clean it up. It felt like tidying a crime scene while the body was still warm. Inside, the house was silent and dark. He didn't turn on the lights. He sat at the same IKEA dining table where he had tried to reason with her about their budget, the one where he had counted every penny to build a life she was now trying to burn to the ground. The paper was damp from the rain. His hands trembled slightly as he tore it open. He was a CPA. He spent his days staring at documents, at contracts, at financial statements. He was trained to find the story in the numbers, the truth hidden in the fine print. But this was different. This was his own life, itemized and devalued. He pulled out the stack of papers, a petition for dissolution of marriage, a summons, and the financial affidavit. His eyes scanned the petition first, the usual legalese, but then he got to the section alleging grounds for divorce. Irreconcilable differences was cited, but it was supplemented with a narrative. It was the same story he had overheard in the kitchen. He was controlling, emotionally distant, and his financial abuse, his refusal to co-sign the $75,000 loan for Eleanor's boutique, was presented as the final straw. It was a masterpiece of fiction, painting him as a villain and Alicia as a long-suffering victim. Then he turned to the financial affidavit. His blood ran cold. Just as she had planned, his premarital assets, the $70,000 he had saved for the down payment on their house, were listed under joint marital assets, with a fraudulent note about an investment club. His 401k, valued at around $150,000, was correctly listed, but her section was a ghost town. Her credit card debt, which he knew to be close to $50,000 across 3 different cards, was listed as a mere $4,500. Her proposal for the division of assets was audacious. She wanted the house, arguing that her emotional investment outweighed his financial one. 50% of his 401k and $3,000 a month in spousal support for 5 years. By her math, she would walk away with the house. Over $75,000 in cash, a steady income stream. And he would be left with half his retirement and all of her debt, which would undoubtedly surface later. It was financial annihilation. He felt a wave of despair so profound, it was almost paralyzing. They had thought of everything. They had twisted his diligence into a weapon against him. He leaned back in his chair, the papers spread before him, and closed his eyes. He felt utterly defeated. And then his training took over. A lifetime of discipline, of looking past the narrative to the data, kicked in. His eyes opened. He wasn't looking at the lies anymore. He was looking at the document itself. As a CPA, he had dealt with hundreds of notarized documents. He knew what to look for. He picked up the signature page of the financial affidavit, the one Alicia had signed under penalty of perjury. His eyes went straight to the bottom right corner. The notary public's seal. It was an embossed circle, crisp and official. He angled the paper to the faint light coming through the window. He read the name, the commission number, and then the date. Date of execution, August 14th. He froze. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the calendar app. Today, his birthday, was August 16th. She had signed it, sworn to its truthfulness, and had it notarized 2 full days ago. He remembered now. August 14th was the day she had a full spa day with Mama at Chateau Elan. It had cost over $800. They weren't getting massages. They were meeting with their lawyer and a notary, executing the documents for his public ambush. A new thought, cold and sharp, cut through the fog of his despair. The prenup. Before they married, his lawyer, a cautious, older man who had seen it all, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. Alicia had laughed it off as an insult, but seeing the size of Terrence's premarital savings, her mother had advised her to sign it, likely assuming it could be challenged later. Terrence hadn't looked at the document in 12 years. But he remembered one specific, unusual clause his lawyer had added. He stood up, walked to his small home office, and opened the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. Behind years of tax returns, he found it, a slim blue folder. He opened it. His eyes scanned the dense text until he found the section he was looking for. Clause 7, subsection C. Service of legal filings. It read, any legal petition, including a petition for dissolution of marriage, must be served to the other party no later than 24 hours from the officially notarized date of execution. Service of any filing outside of this 24-hour window shall render the filing, and all associated financial disclosures therein, null and void. He read it again. And again. It was an obscure clause designed to prevent exactly this kind of strategic backdating and ambush. A 24-hour window. She had served him the papers on August 16th, roughly 48 hours after they were executed on August 14th. She had missed the deadline. In her arrogant theatrical cruelty, in her desire to maximize his humiliation by waiting for the perfect public moment, she had made a fatal, amateur error. She had voided her own petition. All the lies on the financial affidavit, the demand for the house, the claim for his retirement, all of it was legally meaningless. He sat back down at the table, the prenup in one hand, her voided petition in the other. The rain fell harder outside, washing the world clean. He felt no joy, no triumphant surge of adrenaline. Instead, a profound surgical calm settled over him. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in his gut. But now, it had a purpose. The calculator was back online, and he was ready to start running the numbers. The days following the party were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Terrence moved through his life with a chilling, deliberate normalcy that unnerved Alicia more than any outburst would have. He was playing dumb, and he was playing for keeps. Each lie he told, each piece of feigned ignorance, was a scene in a much larger play that only he had the script for. The morning after the party, he woke up at his usual 6 a.m. He went into the kitchen, where Alicia was already sipping coffee, a smug, expectant look on her face. She was wearing another expensive silk robe, this one a deep burgundy that cost $300. She was waiting for him to be broken, to beg, to plead. "Did you sleep?" she asked, her voice laced with false concern. "Not much," he said, his tone flat. He opened the refrigerator and took out the eggs. He started making breakfast just as he did every weekend. The familiar sounds, the cracking of shells, the sizzle of butter in the pan, filled the tense silence. "Have you looked at the papers?" she pressed, unable to hide her impatience. He scooped the scrambled eggs onto a plate and sat down at the table, not looking at her. I glanced at them, he said, picking up his fork. It's a lot to take in. He took a bite of eggs. Her eyes narrowed. Her eyes. This was not the reaction she had anticipated. It's a very generous offer, Terrence, more than fair. My lawyer said so. The best thing for you to do is just sign it. I hear you, he said, his voice calm. I just need some time to process everything. He finished his breakfast in silence, stood up, put his plate in the dishwasher, and went to get ready for work. He put on one of his standard work uniforms, a $150 Brooks Brothers dress shirt, gray slacks, Versant, and his well-shined $200 Johnston & Murphy shoes. He looked exactly like the man he was last week, the boring, predictable calculator. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. I have a late meeting with a new client tonight, so I'll probably be home around 9. This was his first lie. His client was David Miller, a razor-sharp litigation attorney his friend from church had recommended. The meeting was in a discreet coffee shop in Decatur, miles away from his usual downtown haunts. Alicia just nodded, a flicker of annoyance on her face. His composure was ruining her victory lap. Fine, she said. That evening, Terrence sat across from David, a tall, impeccably dressed black man whose suit probably cost more than Terrence's monthly mortgage payment. But his eyes were kind, and his mind was a steel trap. The coffee shop was noisy, providing a perfect cover of anonymity. Terrence laid it all out. The public humiliation, the fraudulent financial affidavit, and finally, the 2 key documents, Alicia's voided petition and their prenuptial agreement. He slid the papers across the table. David read them, his expression shifting from sympathy to focused intensity. When he got to the notary date and then read Clause 7, subsection C of the prenup, a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. Oh, she did not, he said, almost to himself. He looked up at Terrence, his eyes gleaming. Terrence, this is not just a mistake. This is an act of legal self-immolation. This is arrogance on a level I rarely see. They were so focused on the drama, on the cruelty, that they failed to read the contract. So the clause is enforceable? Terrence asked. Enforceable? It's a tactical nuke, David said, leaning forward. Her entire filing is dead on arrival. We don't even have to fight about the fraudulent asset sheet. It's inadmissible because the petition that carries it is void. We can get it thrown out with a simple motion to dismiss. For the next hour, they planned. David advised him to continue playing dumb. Let her think she has you on the ropes, he instructed. Let her get comfortable. In the meantime, we gather our own ammunition. I want you to pull every bank statement, every credit card bill, every investment account statement for the last 5 years. We are going to build a forensic accounting of this marriage so precise, so undeniable, that when we do respond, she will have nowhere to hide. The next day, Terrence told Alicia he had to go into the office on Saturday to catch up on some quarterly reports. Another lie. Instead, he spent 8 hours in a rented temporary office space from Regus for $50 an hour. He had his laptop, a portable scanner, and boxes of financial records he had taken from his home office. He worked with the methodical focus he brought to his most complex audits. He built a spreadsheet. Column by column, he documented every lavish purchase Alicia had made. The $2,400 Yves Saint Laurent bag. The $800 spa day that was actually a meeting with her lawyer. Thousands of dollars spent at Phipps Plaza and Lenox Square. He cross-referenced the dates of her biggest spending sprees with his work travel schedule, noting she often bought expensive items when he was out of town. He also documented his own contributions, the mortgage payments drawn directly from his personal bank account, the property taxes, the car insurance, the down payment that came from an inheritance from his grandmother, with a clear paper trail proving it was premarital. By the end of the day, he had a complete financial narrative of their marriage. It showed a man earning a solid, upper-middle-class salary, diligently paying for their shared life, and a woman systematically draining their resources on luxury goods while contributing almost nothing. The total of her personal, non-essential spending over the last 3 years alone exceeded $130,000. Her documented credit card debt was not $4,500, but $47,821.14. He saved the final spreadsheet. Encrypting the file with a 24-character password, he named it Project Reckoning. When he got home late that evening, Alicia was on the phone with her mother, her voice bright and cheerful. "He's still just moping around," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "I think he's in shock. My lawyer said that's normal. He'll sign next week. He just needs to feel like he has some control." Terrence walked past her into the kitchen to get a glass of water, his face a perfect mask of weary resignation. She was right. He did need to feel like he had some control, and he was taking all of it. The strategic planning phase was where Terrence, the husband, died, and Terrence, the forensic CPA, took complete control. His meetings with David Miller in the gleaming glass tower of his Buckhead law firm were a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of his home life. The offices of Miller and Associates, with their panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline, felt like a war room. The emotional distance provided by the plate glass windows was exactly what he needed. Their first official meeting in the office took place on a Tuesday morning. Terrence had told Alicia he was attending an all-day CPE, continuing professional education seminar downtown. The truth was, he took a personal day. He sat in a plush leather chair across a massive mahogany desk that probably cost $20,000. The air smelled of old books and new money. David's fee was a steep $750 per hour. But as he told Terrence, the best defense is an expensive offense. "All right, show me what you got," David said, his tone all business. Terrence opened his sleek, professional-grade Dell laptop, a $2,500 machine he used for work, and projected the Project Reckoning spreadsheet onto a large screen on the wall. For the next hour, there was silence in the room, broken only by Terrence's calm, measured voice. As he walked David through the numbers, he started with the asset column. Here is the deed to the house, showing the purchase price of $350,000 and the initial mortgage. And here, he clicked, bringing up a separate file, are the bank statements from 2011 showing the $70,000 wire transfer for the down payment from my personal savings account, which was funded by an inheritance from my grandmother. The account was closed upon our marriage, but the paper trail is unbroken. Next, his 401k. He showed the statements from the day before their wedding, with a balance of $32,000, and the most recent statement showing a balance of $152,480. Under the prenup, Terrence said, the initial $32,000 and all gains derived from it are my separate property. Only the contributions made from my salary during the marriage are considered marital property. Then he moved to the liabilities. This was the heart of the matter. He pulled up the credit card statements he had downloaded. American Express, $18,945, Saks Fifth Avenue store card, $11,560, Visa, $17,316, a total of $47,821. He had highlighted the most egregious purchases: a trip to Miami with her mother, $4,200, a single shopping trip to the designer boutiques at the Shops Buckhead, Atlanta, $6,800, and a recurring charge for a lifestyle consultant that cost $500 a month. David let out a low whistle. She listed $4,500 in debt on her affidavit. She did, Terrence confirmed. That's perjury, but we don't even need to use it. Not yet. This is beautiful work, Terrence, David said, his eyes glued to the screen. This is a prosecutor's dream. You've established a clear pattern of dissipation of marital assets. Even without the prenup, this would give us tremendous leverage. But we have the prenup, Terrence said, his voice cold as ice. And we have Clause 7, subsection C. Exactly, David grinned. So here's the plan. We are not going to file a response to her petition. We are going to file a motion to dismiss based on improper service. It's a simple, elegant kill shot. We attach a certified copy of her filing, highlighting the notary date. We attach a sworn affidavit from you stating the date and time you were served. And we attach a copy of the prenup, highlighting the 24-hour clause. The judge won't even need a hearing. He'll dismiss it from his chambers. And then what? Terrence asked. Then the ball is in our court, David explained. Once her petition is dismissed, we file our own petition for divorce. And with it, we file this. He gestured to the spreadsheet on the screen. We file a true and accurate financial affidavit. We lay out the real numbers. According to the prenup, she is entitled to 50% of the marital assets accumulated after accounting for her debt. Given her spending, that number is likely negative. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. They would use the legal system not to fight, but to disqualify her from the match entirely. I want to propose a settlement at the same time, David continued, pacing in front of the window. A walkaway offer. She keeps her personal belongings and her car, and she assumes her own debt. We sell the house, I take my fees, and you walk away with your premarital assets, your 401k, and the remaining equity. She gets nothing else. No spousal support, no piece of your retirement. It's a generous offer, considering what she tried to do to you. She won't take it, Terrence said. Not at first. Her mother won't let her. I know, David said. That's why we don't make the offer to her lawyer. We schedule a 4-way settlement conference. You, me, her, and her lawyer. We let them walk in thinking they have all the power. Let them make their demands one last time. And then we hand them the motion to dismiss. We let them read it, right there in front of us. We watch the blood drain from their faces. Then, and only then, do we slide the walkaway offer across the table? David paused, looking at Terrence intently. This is going to be a confrontation, Terrence. It won't be in your backyard, but it will be just as intense. Are you ready for that? Terrence thought of the clapping. He thought of the words, small man with a small mind. He thought of the years of quiet condescension and the cold, calculated plot to ruin him. Yes, Terrence said, his voice devoid of any emotion. I am. The meeting was set for the following Friday. For the next 10 days, Terrence lived a double life. At home, he was the quiet, wounded husband, seemingly paralyzed by indecision. He ate the dinners Alicia cooked, watched television with her in stony silence, and fielded her increasingly impatient questions. Have you talked to a lawyer yet, Terrence? You're dragging your feet. I'm looking for the right one, he'd say, the lie tasting like ashes in his mouth. But during the day, he was a man preparing for war. He and David refined their strategy, prepared the documents, and rehearsed the meeting. David's paralegal, a sharp young woman named Maria, prepared a binder for the meeting that was a work of art. It was tabbed, indexed, and cross-referenced. It contained every piece of evidence, every statement, every legal precedent. It was a 3-inch thick testament to the truth. The cost for this preparation alone came to over $12,000 in legal fees, an investment Terrence knew would save him hundreds of thousands. He was no longer just a CPA, he was a client. And he was about to witness the return on his investment. The most important question in a betrayal is often why. But sometimes, The most powerful answer is how. How do you fight back? Terrence chose his weapon, the truth, sharpened to a razor's edge. If you've ever had to fight a battle with facts and figures, share your story in the comments. Your experience could give someone else the strength to stand their ground. The strike was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. sharp. The setting was Conference Room B at Miller & Associates, a space designed for intimidation. It was a corner room on the 45th floor, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls offering a dizzying 180-degree view of Atlanta. The city spread out below them, a map of Terrence's past and future. The conference table was a single massive slab of polished black granite that felt cold to the touch. Terrence and David arrived at 9:45 a.m. David was dressed in a custom-tailored Navy suit and $8,000 armor of success. Terrence wore a conservative charcoal suit, his own version of battle dress, a $600 offering from Joss, a bank. He felt a strange, detached calm. He placed his simple leather briefcase on the floor beside him. Inside was a copy of the binder David's team had prepared. David placed his own identical 3-inch binder on the table with a soft, authoritative thud. They sat and waited. At precisely 10:03 a.m., Alicia, her mother Eleanor, and their lawyer walked in. The 3-minute delay was a classic power move, and David and Terrence had anticipated it. Alicia looked triumphant. She was wearing a cream-colored Chanel-style suit that screamed money, a new acquisition he estimated at around $4,000. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, and she carried a new Prada bag, a $3,500 accessory for her victory. Eleanor was right behind her, a smug smile plastered on her face. Their lawyer, a man named Arthur Vance, was in his late 50s with a florid face and a suit that was expensive but didn't fit him quite right. He reeked of cheap confidence. "David, good to see you," Vance boomed, extending a hand that David shook briefly. "And Terrence, glad you could finally join us. I trust you've come to your senses." They took their seats on the opposite side of the vast granite table. The city skyline behind them made them look like silhouettes in a drama. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries, Arthur," David said, his voice smooth as silk. "I believe you wanted to present a settlement offer." Vance puffed out his chest. "Indeed. My client has been more than generous in her initial filing, but in the spirit of avoiding a protracted and messy court battle, she is willing to make a few minor concessions." He slid a single piece of paper across the table. "Alicia will agree to take the house, 60% of the 401k instead of 50, and we will reduce the spousal support request to $2,500 a month for 4 years. In return, Mr. Jones will be absolved of any of her pre-existing consumer debt. It's a gift, David. I advise your client to take it and move on with his life." Terrence felt a flash of white-hot anger, but his face remained impassive. He looked at Alicia. She was staring at him, a look of pitying condescension on her face, as if she were doing him a favor. Eleanor nodded in agreement, her gaze sharp and possessive, as if she were already measuring the rooms in his house for new furniture. David didn't even glance at the paper. He pushed it back across the table with one finger. "The offer is rejected," he said calmly. Vance chuckled. "Rejected? On what grounds?" "You have no grounds. We have a signed financial affidavit. We have documented emotional and financial abuse. You walk into a courtroom with that, your client will be crucified. He'll be lucky to keep his toothbrush." David leaned forward, a predator sensing the kill. "Arthur, let me ask you a question. As an officer of the court, what is the single most important detail on a notarized legal document?" Vance looked confused. "The signature, I suppose. The seal." "And what does the seal signify?" David pressed. "That the person signing is who they say they are, and that they signed it on the date indicated," Vance said, his voice losing some of its bluster. He was starting to look uneasy. "Precisely," David said. "The date." "Maria," he said, turning to his paralegal, who had entered the room silently. "The documents, please." Maria placed 3 identical slim folders on the table, one in front of Vance, one in front of Alicia, and one in front of Eleanor. "Please open them," David said. Vance opened his folder. Inside were 3 pieces of paper. The first was a copy of the signature page from Alicia's own filing. The notary seal and the date, August 14th, were highlighted in yellow. The second page was a sworn affidavit from Terrence, stating he was served the papers at his home at approximately 5:15 p.m. on August 16th. The third page was a copy of Clause 7, subsection C of the prenuptial agreement, also highlighted. A dead silence fell over the room. Vance read the clause, his florid face turning a blotchy pale white. He looked from the paper to Alicia, a dawning horror in his eyes. "When did you serve him?" he whispered to her, his voice hoarse. Alicia looked confused. "At the party, on his birthday, like we planned." "The date, Alicia? The date was the 16th, Vance hissed. "What does it matter?" Eleanor interjected, her voice shrill. "It's just a technicality. A trick." "It's not a trick, Mrs. Lawrence," David said, his voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "It's contract law. It is the agreement your daughter and my client both signed, an agreement you advised her to sign. Her petition and the fraudulent financial disclosures attached to it were served outside the contractually mandated 24-hour window. They are therefore null and void. They have no legal standing. They are nothing more than expensive scrap paper." Alicia's face crumpled. The triumphant mask shattered, revealing a raw, panicked confusion. "What? No. Arthur, he's lying." Vance just shook his head, staring at the papers. He had been played. He had been made a fool of by his own client's arrogance. "He's not lying," he said numbly. David wasn't finished. He slid a 4th document across the table. It was a formal motion to dismiss. "We will be filing this with the court at noon today," he said. "The judge will sign it by the end of the day. Your case will cease to exist." He let that sink in for a moment. The only sound in the room was Alicia's ragged breathing. "However," David continued, his voice softening slightly, "my client is a reasonable man. Despite the malicious nature of your actions, the public humiliation, and the attempted fraud, he is willing to offer you a path forward." He slid one final document across the table. It was a 1-page settlement offer, the walkaway deal. She keeps her car and personal items. She assumes her $47,821.14 in debt. The house is sold, and Terrence retains all equity after fees, based on his premarital contribution. No spousal support. No claim on his 401k. Alicia stared at the paper, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Nothing?" she whispered. "I get nothing?" "You get to walk away without a perjury charge and a mountain of legal fees for a case you cannot win," David stated flatly. "That's the offer. You have 24 hours to sign it. If you do not, at noon tomorrow, we will file our own divorce petition, along with a full forensic accounting of your spending. We will sue for dissipation of marital assets, and we will petition the court to have you pay my client's legal fees, which are currently in excess of $20,000. The choice is yours." Eleanor finally found her voice. "This is blackmail," she shrieked, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "No, madam," Terrence said, speaking for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it commanded the room. He looked directly at Alicia, ignoring her mother completely. "This is accountability. You wanted to be done waiting. You wanted me to sign the papers. So sign them." He repeated her own words back to her, and in the cold, sterile light of the conference room, they sounded like a death sentence. Alicia looked at him, and for the first time she saw not the boring calculator, but the man who had built the engine of their life, and who was now, with surgical precision, taking it apart. There were no tears, just the silent, terrifying recognition of total and complete defeat. The collapse was not a single event, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the arrogance and cruelty that had been set in motion months before. The downfall was as methodical and itemized as the spreadsheet Terrence had built. First came the legal capitulation. The day after the meeting, at 11:47 a.m., just 13 minutes before their deadline, a signed copy of Terrence's settlement offer arrived at David's office via courier. Alicia had signed it. There were no negotiations, no counteroffers, just a signature, scrawled on the page. Her lawyer, Arthur Vance, had likely advised her it was the only sane option. His own bill to Alicia for the disastrously short-lived case was a staggering $15,000, a fee for his initial consultations, document preparation, and the humiliating final meeting. It was a debt she had no way to pay. Second, the financial reality hit. The house in Collier Heights was put on the market and sold within a month for $365,000. After the remaining mortgage of $220,000 was paid and closing costs were settled, the net proceeds were roughly $125,000. As per the prenuptial agreement and settlement, the entire amount went to Terrence, representing his initial $70,000 down payment plus appreciation. Alicia received a check for exactly $0. She was forced to vacate the home she had once lorded over, packing her $1,200 dresses and $2,400 handbags into cardboard boxes. Third was the debt. The settlement legally saddled her with her own liabilities. The $47,821.14 in credit card debt was now hers and hers alone. Without Terrence's $98,000 salary as a backstop, the minimum payments were overwhelming. Within 2 months, she defaulted on the American Express and Saks Fifth Avenue cards. Her credit score, once pristine under the umbrella of Terrence's financial stability, plummeted from 750 to below 500. Collection agencies began calling at all hours of the day and night. Fourth, her living situation imploded. With no money and no home, Alicia had no choice but to move in with her mother. Eleanor's elegant condo in Sandy Springs was, in reality, a 2-bedroom unit, heavily leveraged, with a second mortgage she had taken out to fund her failing boutique. The arrival of her adult daughter, along with all her possessions, turned the small space into a cramped, tense battleground. The mother-daughter alliance, so strong when they were plotting against Terrence, quickly soured under the pressure of shared space and financial ruin. Fifth, the boutique, Eleanor's elegance, died a swift death. The $75,000 loan they had tried to force Terrence to co-sign was meant to be its last gasp of life. Without that infusion of cash, and with no divorce settlement to plunder, Eleanor couldn't make her next rent payment. The landlord initiated eviction proceedings. She was forced to hold a liquidation sale, selling off her $500 blouses for $25 and her designer knockoff handbags for $10. The final proceeds from the liquidation were less than $5,000, not even enough to cover her outstanding vendor bills. The boutique and Eleanor's identity as a glamorous business owner were gone. Sixth was the social fallout. The story of what had really happened spread like wildfire through their circle of friends. The 30 people who had witnessed the public humiliation at the party now understood the context. They had seen Alicia's cruelty, but now they knew about Terrence's quiet, strategic response. The sympathy they had felt for him transformed into respect. The disdain they had for Alicia and Eleanor hardened into ostracization. Phone calls went unreturned. Invitations stopped coming. A friend of Alicia's, one who had been at the fateful dinner party in Buckhead, saw her at a grocery store and turned her cart down another aisle to avoid her. The social status she had craved and spent so much money to project had evaporated overnight. Finally, there was the ignominy of her transportation. The lease on her BMW X3, the $650 a month status symbol, was up. With her credit destroyed, she had no hope of leasing another luxury car. She had to sell some of her expensive handbags on a consignment website, The Real Real, getting pennies on the dollar just to scrape together enough cash to buy a car. She ended up with a 2010 Toyota Corolla with 140,000 miles on it, purchased for $6,500 in cash. Driving the beat-up sedan around the pristine streets of Sandy Springs was a daily, grinding reminder of everything she had lost. Terrence, meanwhile, watched none of this happen directly. He heard about it in bits and pieces from mutual acquaintances. He felt no pleasure, no schadenfreude. He only felt a quiet, somber sense of order being restored. The numbers had been reconciled. The books were balanced. The consequences were not a punishment he had inflicted. They were simply the logical outcome of their own actions. A debt coming due. 1 year later, the Atlanta sun streamed through the large industrial windows of a converted warehouse in West Midtown. The light illuminated the specks of dust dancing in the air and fell across a newly installed sign on a brick wall. The sign was simple, elegant, and rendered in brushed steel. Precision Forensic Accounting, LLC. This was Terrence's new world. After the divorce was finalized, he had quit his job at the large, impersonal accounting firm. He sold the house in Collier Heights and used the proceeds, the money he had rightfully protected, as seed capital. He invested $50,000 to launch his own boutique firm. He rented this 800-square-foot office space for $2,400 a month, a calculated risk that felt more exciting than any purchase he had ever made. The space was open and airy, with exposed brick, polished concrete floors, and a small garden of succulents he tended to on the windowsill. It was the physical manifestation of his new life, transparent, solid, and growing. He was no longer just a CPA who reviewed tax returns. He was a financial detective. His clients weren't large corporations. They were individuals, mostly women, who found themselves in the terrifying position he had been in, facing a divorce with a financially deceptive partner. He found hidden accounts, traced dissipated assets, and untangled complex webs of lies, all with the calm, surgical precision he had discovered within himself. His tagline was, "Clarity in Crisis." His business was thriving. He was now earning more than he had at his old job, but the money felt different. It felt like a byproduct of his purpose, not the goal itself. His new salary was closer to $150,000, but he lived more simply than ever. He had a small, stylish apartment in a new building overlooking a park, and he still drove his paid-off Honda Accord. His phone rang. It was his new client, a woman named Sarah, a schoolteacher whose husband, a wealthy contractor, claimed he was nearly bankrupt. "Terrence, I can't thank you enough," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My lawyer just called. They found the offshore account you flagged, the one in the Cayman Islands. There's over $500,000 in it." "That's good news, Sarah," Terrence said, a genuine warmth in his voice. "The truth has a way of coming out when you know where to look." "You've given me my life back," she said. "You've given my kids their future back." He hung up the phone and looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. His work was done for the day. He packed his simple $89 Timex watch and his laptop into his worn leather briefcase. As he was about to leave, he noticed a small framed object on his desk that a visitor might overlook. It wasn't a family photo. He had no children, no smiling faces to display. It was the notary seal. He had asked David for the original page from Alicia's filing after the case was closed. He had it professionally cut and framed. It wasn't a trophy of his victory over her. It was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the biggest, most life-altering truths are found in the smallest details. It was a reminder that arrogance always leaves a paper trail. He had forgiven Alicia. Not for her, but for him. He had forgiven her to release the bitterness that would have otherwise poisoned his new life. Forgiveness, he had learned, was not about condoning the act. It was about closing the account. It was a final journal entry that balanced the books of his own heart, allowing him to move forward with a zero balance of resentment. True wealth, he now understood, had nothing to do with the price tag on your car or the brand of your handbag. It wasn't about a $350,000 house or a $98,000 salary. True wealth is integrity. It's the security of knowing you can stand on your own. It's the purpose you find in using your skills, not just for profit, but for protection. It's the quiet peace of a balanced ledger, not just in your finances, but in your soul. Life is not always fair, and people's motives are not always clear. But the truth, like a number, cannot be changed. It can be hidden, obscured, or lied about, but it remains constant. The most powerful thing you can do is to have the courage to face that truth, to build your life upon it, and to use it to protect yourself and others. That is a foundation that can never be demolished. Have you ever found a new purpose after a difficult time? Share how you turned a challenge into a new beginning in the comments below. Your story of resilience could be the light someone else needs to find their way out of the dark.